Hey there, I hope you're doing okay this fine day. I wanted to take a moment to talk about Netflix. The company has recently been planning to end password sharing, which is the practice of a few friends or family members who do not live in the same household sharing an account and splitting the cost. Obviously, this works because, as per the different plans Netflix offers, you can pay for access to more concurrent screens. You can watch on 4 different devices at the same time, in fact, with the premium tier. Previously, Netflix has either not cared all that much about password sharing or actively encouraged it, as you can see in this tweet where Netflix states, quote, "Love is sharing a password," end quote. This is obviously a nod to, well, password sharing. So why, if the company previously either didn't care or low-key encouraged the practice, does Netflix now wish to crack down on password sharing? Well, to answer that question, we're going to need to talk about everyone's favorite economic system, capitalism. You see, the simple answer is that Netflix isn't really growing as much anymore. In fact, the company's growth has stagnated, which not only caused its speculative value to stagnate, but in fact crash. Could this be because of increased competition, what with HBO, Disney, Amazon, etc., getting into the streaming business? Sure. But the foremost reason for stock gains or losses seems to be, from my perspective, their speculative value. In other words, whether or not potential investors believe the stock will gain or lose. And this belief is largely informed by growth. The idea that for something to be valuable, it must always be larger today than it was yesterday, and even larger tomorrow. And not just larger, but it must be getting larger at an increased pace. It is not sufficient for Netflix to gain more subscribers in a year if the gain is smaller than it was last year. Same thing happens in the video game industry quite a lot, where you have the latest Call of Duty selling hundreds of millions of copies, but the last Call of Duty sold hundreds of millions of copies plus one. So the new one is disappointing to investors. I think this attitude is quite delusional because it is an expectation of infinite growth in a finite system. There is a finite number of human beings in the world. Sooner or later, the market will be saturated and growth will stagnate. That is inevitable, unavoidable, obviously. So, what happens when you are a streaming giant and you hit this wall? What happens is you now try to find other ways to boost your growth, and thus your stock value, without actually providing any additional value to your customers. Less value, in fact. Like, for example, upending a previous reluctant acceptance of password sharing and now seeking to end the practice instead in hopes of pushing a few more million people to subscribe rather than share. This only postpones the problem, of course, because even if Netflix is successful in pushing people to subscribe on their own instead of sharing, eventually that relatively small pool of people will also be saturated, and the company runs into the same wall, except now they're offering a significantly worse product. But in the meantime, if Netflix's plans succeed, the company gets to feel successful for a few more years of increased growth, and this would likely trigger Netflix's rivals to pursue similar strategies, because it is short term growth and profits that incentivize the behavior of corporations. You see, the economy is a house of cards, nothing more than the hopes and dreams of fragile human beings. Value is not based on actual value, but perceived value. And perceived value is often based on growth. The thought of something being worth more than when you bought into it because it's growing, either in user base or revenue, even though the revenue itself is of little consequence, as long as it increases is the main factor. The problem with this is that there is no such thing as infinite growth, because there aren't infinite people. So, when the market is inevitably saturated and growth stagnates, the stocks crash in value, presumably to a level that is more appropriate to the actual material value being provided rather than the perceived speculative value. Infinite growth is a capitalist myth that is the driving force behind the entire house of cards, that is, the economy. When we speak of a company's value, we're not actually talking about what value they provide in terms of goods or services, but the perceived speculative value of the stocks, disassociated from any material value of goods or services. Sure, the material value of goods or services can cause the value of stocks to go up because investors believe it will cause growth as consumers consume, but it's not because of the value of the goods and services, but rather because of the belief in growth. This is why Netflix can provide the same service, provide the same value to customers, yet have their stocks crash because of stagnated growth and thus less perceived speculative value. The economy is a house of cards that artificially inflates and deflates the speculative value of companies based on nothing really, just the hopes and dreams of investors. If Netflix does end up moving to end password sharing, I'll likely cancel my subscription, to be honest. I'd rather not incentivize anti consumer practices. It's enough for me to get Netflix for a month every other year or so to binge what I want to binge and then cancel again. I'm not judging what anyone else would do, because that is up to them. But I do honestly feel like Netflix really isn't an essential streaming service anymore. There are a few good shows I like, such as Stranger Things, but I don't need to be subscribed longer than necessary to see what I actually want to see. At least we got some funny tweets out of this whole thing, if nothing else. Like this one saying college students aren't going to get an account just because they're no longer allowed on their parents' account, and that there's nothing good to watch anyway. 367.4k likes. Or this one wondering if Netflix even knows about long distance relationships, kids in college, and poor people, as if Netflix would care, to be honest. 306.7k likes. I thought these two talking about piracy were pretty funny because Netflix implementing restrictive rules and, ironically, the existence of the large number of competitors are making it less and less convenient to watch stuff. And the less convenient it gets, the more likely people are to pirate the stuff instead. 259.7k likes and 37.9k likes. Obviously, likes ain't everything, but it seems that there is a strong sentiment online that if Netflix F's about, they might just find out. Perhaps my favorite tweet on the topic, however, is this one, which says, quote, "This is the end result of line go up mentality. The shareholders class is literally convinced that infinite growth is possible and that magically they can make the line go up from nothing." End quote. That is exactly right and precisely what this video has been about. So thanks for that concise summary. An economic system that is satisfied by nothing but infinite and exponential growth is bound to crash eventually. Netflix pushing to end account sharing may stave off another crash, might even lead to growth, but the same stagnation in growth is bound to happen eventually, because the world is finite. So, how do you feel about Netflix ending password sharing? If you do currently share, would you be more or less likely to subscribe to Netflix in the future if they implemented this change? Share your thoughts in the comments, and remember to like and subscribe. If you enjoy the video and would like to see more, please consider supporting me on Patreon. Thanks for watching The Quest for Infinite Growth, a Netflix original. Stay tuned for part 2. Oh wait, never mind. I'm hearing part 2 has been cancelled.